And this is the Wrestling Collector Zone again today for you. We have another top 5 video. This is the top 5 best factions, or otherwise known as stables to some of you. I had sat down, tried to make a list, went online, did a little bit of research, and just tried to look because I wanted to make a list of factions that were current day factions, as well as factions that were back like in the late 70s, 80s, stuff like that, 90s. Because I feel it's only fair if we're going to do like a top 5 factions and not like do a year range, that if you're doing a top 5 overall, we should sit here and go ahead and do a list that could be spread out kind of evenly of some of the older factions as well as some of the newer. So like I had sat down some of the factions that originally made the list that may have not ended up on the final was like the Undisputed Era, like the Riot Club, stuff like that. And I just kind of sat down and tried to break it down to 5. And I really ended up with about 7 or so, and then narrowed it down to 5. And this is spread across like all companies, not just here in America, like New Japan as well. Factions that were back in like the ECW and WCW days. So anyways, let's jump into it. I don't want to keep you guys too long. So let's jump into it. And I want to go from 5 down to 1. 1 being, in my opinion, which was the number 1 top faction that overall was more popular and that I had liked as well. Number 5 would be Raven's Nest, which was an ECW. He also later, when he went to WCW, had kind of like somewhat the same gimmick stable, but it was called the Ravens Flock. It was just with different people. But I'm narrowing it down to the Raven's Nest in ECW, which consisted of Raven, along with Stevie Richards, Blue Meanie, Nova, which was, they were the BWO. The BWO kinda had joined Raven's Nest. Alright. They were involved in some great storylines against feud with Raven versus the Sandman, and then also Raven versus Tommy Dreamer. For everyone that knows the earlier days of ECW, there was like a long, drawn out, for years, feud between Raven and Tommy Dreamer there. Overall, they were definitely a great faction. Let's go ahead and move on to number 4. Number 4, I want to say, is the Bullet Club. The Bullet Club was basically... The Bullet Club was kind of... It wasn't like a huge... Or they're not like a huge faction, but they're in New Japan Pro Wrestling, and they have made their way somewhat to America time to time when they have one of their wrestlers that are like the leader of that faction or whatever, like Kenny Omega. Kenny Omega, at one point when he was in New Japan, he was the head of the Bullet Club. When AJ Styles was a wrestler that was over in New Japan Pro Wrestling, he was the leader of the Bullet Club. Finn Balor also was involved at one point, that he was the head of the Bullet Club. And it just kind of all went from there, that they're a really good faction, that they are the bad guys, but people had loved them. They also had like Marty Scurll as part of the Bullet Club. The Gorillas of Destiny are part of the Bullet Club. when Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows was in New Japan. Still, they were part of the Bullet Club. So there was definitely a lot of famous American wrestlers that were over there as part of the Bullet Club, and some still are, as well as there are quite a few Japanese wrestlers that are parts of the Bullet Club. I don't know as many of their names offhand. I know. Anyways, let's jump down to number 3. Number 3, I want to say, is the Fabulous Freebirds. The Fabulous Freebirds were Terry Gordy, Michael Hayes. But anyways, the main 2 guys were Terry Bam Bam Gordy and Michael P. Hayes. And they were a really great faction that held tons of titles. They were around during the territory days. So they had actually moved from territory to territory, which was great because they had actually stuck together for so long. Because a lot of times when some teams would end up leaving a territory and moving on to another territory, how the old days of wrestling worked, they would sometimes split up those factions or teams, and the Fabulous Freebirds had stuck together for a very long time and a very long run, and a lot of the different territories. Number 2 would be Four Horsemen. The Four Horsemen, which I'm speaking of like the original Four Horsemen. That was Ole Anderson, Arn Anderson, Ric Flair. But the original Four Horsemen, there were numerous later on different renditions that had brought in like Mongo McMichael and Chris Benoit and some Dean Malenko and some of the other wrestlers. So I want to stress on the fact of the original Four Horsemen and not the later renditions. And overall, they had controlled the NWA, the Crockett Promotions and everything, and WCW for a very long time, with storylines that they overall had was a very powerful stable, and just everyone had loved the Four Horsemen. And now going down to number 1, which is the Hart Foundation. At later times, varied who was in the Hart Foundation, but who I'm going to name off, which was British Bulldog and Jim the Anvil Neidhart. At one point, I believe Brian Pillman had actually, in the late 90s, had joined the Hart Foundation as well. But they were a very influential and powerful faction in the WWF days, and had went up head to head with D-Generation X, as well as some of the other factions within wrestling at that point. His feud with like Stone Cold and stuff like that. And they had numerous great matches that were like 4 versus 4 matches, 3 versus 3 matches. So overall, just the Hart Foundation honestly is one of the top ones that I can remember that I enjoyed watching a lot. And again, had one of my favorite wrestlers, Bret Hart. Bret Hart, again, best there is, best there was, and the best there ever will be. Overall, it's just, that's my top 5 for favorite / best factions or stables. I left out like the NWO, obviously, because the NWO was kind of overrated, with everybody that stepped foot in a WCW ring almost was a member of the NWO at one point or another. And the NWO Wolfpack and like even D-Generation X, they were great, and they had some great storylines in the earlier 90s, but like as they tried to bring them back here and there, it just was not for me, and I didn't care for them as much. But overall, that's my top 5. If you guys have a top 5, top 3, just top 1 even, make sure you post it below. Let us know who your favorite faction stables were, and we can go ahead and make a just chat about that. Otherwise, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, hit that notification bell, so you get notifications when my videos go live. And this was the Wrestling Collector Zone again. You guys have a great night.